I just, you know, I did nothing about that.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you guys for being brave and sitting in the front row. Oh my gosh. My name is Benjamin Johnson. I'm the events coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers here in Saskatoon. This event is being held on Treaty 6 territory, which is the land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. As we listen to our speakers share their words today, may we also keep in mind the Indigenous stories that have been shared on this land since time immemorial. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon launch of Like a River Divides the Earth by Dora Dueck, published by Freehand Books. Thank you so much to Dora for being here and for working with us to make this event happen, as well as Shawn Mooney for being here to host this event. Just to note, this event is being live streamed, so I'm looking at you, Sharon. Just be very careful with the webcam behind you. Please also take a moment to silence your phones for the duration of the event. If you would like to buy copies of Like a River Divides the Earth or Dora's book, All That Belongs, you can find them both on the signing table off to our left. That's where you can find Dora after the event, and then also by where you first walked in. You're welcome to get your book signed before you purchase it, but, and I cannot stress this enough, if you get it signed, please purchase it. We will also have a Q&A period following the reading, so please think of some hard-hitting questions for our author. She's chuckling because she wants that. So, and now to introduce our author. Dora Dueck is the author of 4 books of fiction and a collection of essays and memoir, as well as essays, stories, and poetry in a variety of journals. Honors include the McNally Robinson Book of the Year Award, the High Plains Book Award for Short Fiction, and the winner of the Malahat Review's Novella Contest. A longtime resident of Winnipeg, she now lives in Delta, BC, and we're very happy to have her here. Everyone, please give her a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Really going to be creating.
I don't think it's on, is it? Hard to hear you.
Pardon me?
We can't to hear you. Can't hear you.
Maybe it's, is it turned on?
Okay, are we good now?
There.
Yeah, okay. What? Closer. Here.
Yeah, there you go.
I was trying to persuade them to sit in the front and yeah. It's really nice to be in Saskatoon. For those of you that don't know, our family actually lived here for a couple of years, way back in the early 80s, yeah, 1980s. And we made some good friends, and my sisters were living here at the time. So that was really nice. And yeah, we would have stayed except for circumstances, which is like in the book, you know, things change and you end up somewhere else. So also thank you to McNally. It's a wonderful bookstore. Just had a really great event in Winnipeg. Appreciated that. And especially to Shawn, who you will hear later. I've come to admire his book channel. So do check it out. It's called Shawn Breathes Books. And he reads voraciously, I would say, and talks about books. All right, so this is a book of 5 stories. And a book of short fiction is a little harder to describe than a novel because each story is different. And so I think I'm just going to sort of walk through the stories, and I'll read a snippet from 3 of them and hope that gives a bit of an introduction. So the first story, Mask, appeared in the Malahat Review back in 2014, I think it was, and it rises out of the awfulness of the First World War. Well, maybe I'll just read the first paragraph and then say a little bit more. I was 14 before I saw my father's face. The ruins, I mean, the face behind the mask. Holes instead of a nose. Dark holes in a pink crater of pulled tight skin, running from cheekbone to cheekbone, though the tip had been spared, and stood there by itself, pale and hideous, as if too stubborn or stupid to quit when abandoned. Nostrils like tiny arches, and where his right eye should have been, he had a crater too. So the narrator becomes kind of caught between her father with the wounded face and a mask, and her mother, and their competing versions of the war, glory versus grit and horror. I'm going to read just another little section out of that story from Paige. Okay. One summer, I played with Elsie, a thin, bossy girl with tight braids who lived a few houses down from my grandparents' house. She had two brothers, one older, one younger, either or both of them constantly available, it seemed, to be a nuisance. I didn't mind, actually. I was fascinated by the notion of brothers and their restless, jibing interest in what we did. And besides, it was her they pestered, not me. When she'd had enough, Elsie tattled to her mother, who bustled wearily to the scene to slap the tyrant away. Then for a while we had peace for another game of paper dolls. Elsie owned a set of paper babies, as well as assorted older paper children, and some Jane Arden paper she declared too precious for anyone but herself to hold. She let me choose the wardrobes, though, while she did the dressing, and when I told her I was smart in school, she said I could have turns at making up the story scenarios. One afternoon we played inside because of the weather. I remember how the rain hit against the window pane, then slid down as if mortified. Soon Elsie's brother Albert found us. He crawled under the bed beside us and proceeded to imitate the sounds of animals. Some were known to me, some new. He did so softly, eerily, as if he'd assembled a menagerie of ghosts. He refused to quit or leave, so Elsie stormed off to find her mother. While she was gone, Albert peeked his head out and smiled at me. I couldn't tell what he meant by it, whether he was satisfied with himself for upsetting his sister or being friendly. I didn't have much experience with boys. There were boys at school, of course, but though all were male, somehow those boys and these brothers, as well as our fathers, seemed distinct and quite separate entities to me. In Albert's smile, however, those distinctions dissolved, and a sentence popped into my head, as clear and complete as if printed on a notice board in large letters. Dad used to be a boy. This was so obvious I was embarrassed. Still, joy had sparked in me, joy like a squeal, like one of Albert's exotic creatures. Thinking of Dad, once a boy like this, lively, inventive, mischievous. And the beating rain had stopped, and a patch of light slid into the room, as if the sky had parted in front of the sun. The second story is called Blue. It's the most recently written of the stories, and it's about four women who live together, which people are doing, I've read, apparently, for companionship and financial reasons and so on. So they rent a place. And an unexpected event brings up the puzzles and regrets of grief. I think that's how I would sum that one up. The third story is called Her Own Self. There's two stories in the book that are from, that arise out of Mennonite historical events. And this one comes out of, in 1929, like my parents came out of Russia in the mid-1920s, but in 1929, the doors had more or less closed, except that the rumor went around Russia that they were letting some people exit. And before you knew it, almost some 13,000 people had converged in Moscow attempting to get out. And the story comes out of that. I mean, I'm not giving too much history in the story, but just enough so that it's understandable. And my husband Helmut's family was part of that group. And fictional Herman carries and champions this big narrative, you know, of the story of the about 5,000 were eventually allowed to leave. I'm rounding the numbers off, and the rest were sent back to who knows where, Siberia and other places. And Marta, fictional Marta, tries to hang on to a sense of self in the face of this personal loss and her own maybe some guilt and unresolved resentment. So I'm just going to read. It has sisters in it and a marriage. In Moscow then, and waiting, the refugees written into lists, their representatives strategizing for attention from Soviet bureaucrats. Herman tried to be of use. He watched at the station for new arrivals, assisted them if he could. What he did was dangerous. Lurkers had been arrested, imprisoned. Marta implored him to quit, and reluctantly he did. One day he shoveled coal to earn a few rubles. On another, he worked for a meat cutter. The man refused to pay and threatened to report him to the police. Herman said he enjoyed those hours in spite of this, and declared that once in Canada he would find work as a butcher. His optimism made Marta anxious, and she was grateful when her father said, "Let's get there first." They're with her parents. She was even more anxious when Herman asked her to join him and a friend on an excursion into the city. She gulped, said no, but he went anyway. Oh, I forgot to explain that their infant child died just before they went to Moscow. When he returned, Marta begged him not to describe it to her parents. "But can't I talk with you?" he asked. "My wife?" Yes, of course. They sat on a bench outside the cottage in the chill, each staring ahead as if dusk were a landscape. He told her what they saw, he and his friend, strolling down avenues, views of the Kremlin from a bridge, a man playing a violin on a street corner in the Arbat. Sweet music, he said, which in those moments had made him long to stay instead of leave. And after that, the circus. The word circus riveted her like envy, but she resented him and what he had seen and the money he had spent. He seemed mesmerized by the tremendous spectacle of their people in Moscow, the sudden largeness of the world. His soul, she thought acridly, suited a Soviet's. They were fleeing the communist upheaval, and in the midst of it, he smudged, erased the memory of his small dead son, buried near a leafless acacia, the ground bleak and probably dusted with snow. Wide-eyed at bears in jackets and hats, clowns. She wondered how she would find the strength to forgive a visit to the circus. For nothing, she thought, could be forgiven or overcome these days. Nothing good sprang out of the bad. She drew her coat tightly around herself, crossed her arms, stayed silent. This silenced him as well, though birds, hidden, unafraid, twittered in the bushes. The earth was damp and the silence spread between them like fog. Then Herman said, "Oh, Marta," I looked and I laughed, and all I wanted was David beside me. I pictured him old enough, pointing and laughing, like the youngsters in the seats nearby. He'll never see it, and I could have cried. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. She breathed in, held the breath, felt soft, grateful and buttery. All was forgiven. She leaned against him and tears swelled in her eyes, though he would not see them, for the light was gone and they faced into the dark. She decided she would treasure these sentences forever. Her man Herman hungry like that, hungry at the circus for their boy. The fourth story, The Regatta, is one of the very first stories I wrote, like 40 years ago or whenever I started writing stories. It's a very simple tale of a mother and son, and sort of is in my file for years and years and years and years. And I never quite knew what to do with it, but I often start things and abandon them and don't bother to keep them. But this one I did, and so in more recent years, I found a way to reframe it as it's the same story, but it's being told. So it's being listened to by someone, and also gained some insights maybe into the backstories. So that's The Regatta, an old story restructured, whatever you want to call it. The last story is Like a River Divides the Earth. It's the title story. It's another Mennonite, it comes out of a Mennonite history. And now I should quiz some of the Mennonites here. Have you ever heard of Shumanovka? Yeah.
Eastern Siberia.
Right, yeah, the Amur River area. The Amur River is the 10th longest river in the world, and it's the border between Russia and China. And at the same time that people were converging in 1920, around the same years that they were converging in Moscow, others had moved way to the far, far east of Russia, assuming that Stalin's arms were not that long, and surely they'd be fine over there. And they settled in a number of villages and settlements in the Amur River region, right close to the river, actually. And there's a very sort of famous, I suppose, story, miraculous, really. That's how it's treated. It's celebrated as a miracle. There's the village Shumanovka, on one very cold December night, crossed the frozen Amur River into China, the entire group of them. Now, the thing is, they were supposed to go together with another village, and for various reasons, they left without them. And so when we lived in Paraguay, there was a group of villages there called the Harbina, which is the villages from Harbin, which is the Russian or the Chinese city where these villagers went. And I heard the triumph, that it's the celebration story. Rudy Weeb talks about it in the Blue Mountains of China and so on. But I sort of find myself drawn to people who don't get the miracle, especially when, in this case, fictional, Nikolai's girlfriend is in the village that crosses and he's left behind. So I'll just read a little bit from this story. Shumanovka. Nikolai hears the word. It's said by the man across from him, every syllable distinct but almost alien in the man's way of speaking, stretched out. But there's a lilt in it too, and that's a surprise, and he doesn't like the lilt. The surprise, he wasn't thinking about this word, this name, not at all, nor what it contains for him, so deep in the layers of his life by now. And then again, Shumanovka. He winces, he feels afraid. The man, a guest, as free with it as if he knows it well, caressing the beats like warm, thick fur. And for a moment, the village street seems to materialize above the coffee and buns and pickles and cake. The wintry street as long as an arrow, through his mind again, the empty houses, the shock of that emptiness, in the glare of an unfriendly morning sun. It hovers, then dissolves into the sounds and motions of their eating. The man is going on to mention the river, the Amur River, he says. Nikolai gulps at his coffee, draws in the heat, its consoling smell. Does a river have a smell? Does ice? His daughter Anna beside him, that is, when she's not jumping up to the kitchen for some reason or another. Her voice is gentle, urgent. A question for you, Papa. Nikolai sets down his cup, looks up. The man is repeating himself, louder as if Nikolai is deaf. The man is asking what he knows of Shumanovka. So that sets off his reminiscences of being left behind. I think that's it.
We take bets now as to whether I'm gonna knock this over. I usually have a ball with a lid on it.
Is this actually on?
All right, so is this where should I hold it? About here?
Yeah, that's
Okay. Dora, welcome back to Saskatoon. It's so great to meet you. I met Dora virtually when I interviewed her. I've interviewed her twice on my BookTube channel, and most recently an interview about her most recent novel, All That Belongs, which there's no other authors here whose books I've read this year, so I'm very comfortable in saying, because it's true, it's the best book I've read, novel I've read so far this year. Dora, you have written, this is your second collection of short stories, and you've written a few novels and a memoir. Have I missed a genre? Essays?
No. Well, the Return Stroke has essays and.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to get us going in when the story comes to you, or the inkling of the story, or the germ of the story. There's some obvious things that would make it essay, or short story, or a middling novella, or a longer novel. But I'm interested in going beneath the obvious things. How do you find your length or your genre? And maybe the supplemental, which I'll ask ahead of time, is, have you ever started a short story and it turned into a novel, or vice versa?
Well, none of my novels were short stories first, so that answers that part of the question. I for many years I did have a longing to write about the 1929 episode in Moscow, and I even like I was thinking of doing all the diplomatic back and forth. Germany, Russia, and Canada were engaged in a very interesting and sort of fraught discussion about what to, well, and of course the Soviets as well, they were embarrassed in the eyes of the world for these refugees wanting to leave. So but that just became too, and I thought, well, do the diplomatic stuff going on and then have the fictional people. That just became too overwhelming, I guess, or so anyways, I dropped that and it just became this short story, and I feel satisfied that that whole episode thing, I always wanted to do a story set there. And I feel like now I have, and it's good that it's a short story, didn't need to be a novel. So I don't know, is that?
That's great. That you read a bit from that last story, the title story, Like a River Divides the Earth, and I'd like to kind of set the table with a short quote from that story. The main character experiences the trauma, and you've already described it, so you've already spoiled it, so I don't have to keep it a secret about the being left behind, the village being left behind, which is the trauma that shapes the rest of his life. And the quote is that betrayal divided his life like a river divides the earth, and you live on one side or you live on the other. And that quote makes me think of other demarcations, if I can get all academic for just a half a second, or boundary making between some stories of before or an after, or you either lived this experience or you didn't. So, can you tell us about some of those rivers that divide the earth and one or two of the other stories?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for sure, the war in Mask, the First World War, which, yeah, I mean, and then that division kind of flows through the family life. To be wounded in the face. In some of this other stories, there's death. Death is a huge, you live on one side of that experience or another. I mean, it's a pretty grief. Yeah, it's a pretty universal thing. Like all of us, I think, in our lives, we have something where we see, okay, I was over there and now I'm over here because of this maybe decision, maybe it's a circumstance. Often it's circumstances beyond our control. I mean, you see around the world, people in Gaza, people like yeah, it's just, yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing that that you can't help but notice about this collection, which I just loved, it's a wonderful collection, is sometimes there's a competition or a polarity or a tension between larger narratives, and I'm thinking about the World War I narrative in Mask and certain narratives of Mennonite history and the two Mennonite stories, versus a personal narrative, stories of selfhood, and those journeys, those narrative journeys or journeys of discovery are often by the female characters. And I wondered if you could riff on that for a bit.
Oh, that's the story of our lives. Trying to maintain our stories, maybe in the midst of a larger world, but yeah, but I more seriously, I think any large story like an immigration story, anything that Mennonites really stress community, anything that sort of has shaped community or is a larger story. There are still so many individual stories within that, but sometimes I think particularly maybe for a woman who has her own, in this case, experiences of, yeah, I won't say what they are, but to sort of hang on to that in the midst of this bigger identity, the pressure of that larger story. And I think we all, again, belong to certain identifiable communities, identities, and sometimes we're comfortable with that. Sometimes we find ourselves struggling to resist the larger narrative.
And it's embedded quite concisely in the title, Her Own Self.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Although her gestures are small, aren't they? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing that I noticed so palpably in, I would say 4 out of 5 stories, and if I thought a bit more about the 5th story, I'd probably be able to find an example there too, is that the characters, there's at least one character, usually the main character, in every story that is yearning or driven to share their story, to share their lived experience with another human being. And that really, in many of them, it's the underlying dynamic that is kind of threads the needle of how the story unfolds. And just to give a couple of examples, none of these are spoilers. Well, you have already talked about the regatta. The woman needs to tell, I guess we can say it's a chaplain, something, a really powerful experience, a really intense emotional experience. The main character in the 4 women who are housemates story, Lily, she comes to the house and she has fairly recently, her husband has died fairly recently. She's still dealing with her grief and she's yearning she hopes that she can tell her new housemates about it. So sometimes the yearning is thwarted. It is in that story to a certain degree, but it seems to be a powerful thread to the stories. And I wondered if you could tell us more about that.
Well, I think this is an instance that I just love, because when I'm putting together a collection like this or writing stories, I'm not thinking, well, why don't I write 5 sort of confessional stories? You know, but an astute reader like you tells me, oh, that's a thread. And so I find that interesting. And I think the desire to share ourselves with others is a deeply human impulse and a need. So there is that confession. And I'm reminded of, I often think of this now that I'm a widow and living alone. I think of the line that Susan Sarandon in the movie Shall We Dance, where she says, she's talking about marriage. She says, we all need witnesses to our lives, you know, and once, if you're living alone, you don't have a witness to your life. And so I think there is a compulsion, a human need to be witnessed by others. And so without like thinking about it consciously as I was writing the stories, thank you for sort of noticing that, because I actually hadn't like noticed that it was a sort of a theme in all the stories.
That's why they pay me the big bucks. Let's get into the drama here. Another thread is the guilty secrets. There's a lot of guilt and a lot of secrets in these stories, and we're not going to tell you any of the secrets, but so we're going to be careful about how I pose the question and how Dora answers. But the key narrative spark of the first story, Mask, it's there in that first line. The daughter sees her husband, or her father, without his mask. But there are guilty secrets in, I think, almost all of the other stories. So what do you want to tell us about guilt and secrets?
I guess I'm thinking, where? Where's the guilt? But no, you're right. Me.
I can give you a couple more examples.
No, that's okay.
Oh, you're okay. Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess again, that is that a compulsion to share, and then but maybe not finding the person, you know, like if you have are troubled by something that happened, let's say with your sister, but the big story is, hey, we got out of Moscow. Wow, we can celebrate this every year. It doesn't seem, it becomes kind of secretive. Yeah, so yeah, there's some guilt there.
You mentioned when you described the story, the regatta, that it was the one that you'd worked on the longest. You also said elsewhere that it's a story that has haunted you. And we need to hear more about that.
Mm. Well, yeah, it's such a simple story of a mother and son. And I would describe the turn in the story without giving it away as a no becoming a yes. And I almost, like when I first wrote it, sort of felt as if without ever, like, you can't just say, well, suddenly she said yes. So I always felt there was something divine or outside of herself that had compelled that. As I continued to work on the story, I gained insight into the backstory, which maybe just kind of finally brittled, we would say in German, up to the top, and it kind of came out in a yes. So yeah, like I said before, I start stories and I don't always finish them, but there's some that there's still something here. There's an initial that I'm listening to and saying, what is this about, you know? And I think I mentioned to you, Shawn, that I attended a 1 week workshop with Alexander McLeod at Banff, and he emphasized, you serve the story. What does the story want? You know, and I think that's what was haunting me. I told the story, but I wasn't sure if the story was happy with it, with what I was doing with it. You know, I had to dig a little deeper, figure it out. So it feels more complicated to me now, and I hope it's satisfied.
Well, my follow-up question would be, now that it's in print, is the haunting over?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
I have more questions, but why don't we try to get some audience questions, and then if need be, I'll ask more. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
So we'll trade this one's for you.
Okay.
This one's for you, right?
Stand your face here.
If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. I'll be happy to run the microphone to you. I mean, right there. You bet.
Oh, by the way, this is Kevin Coop, and he has a birthday today.
Oh, Dora just can't handle an event that's all about herself. Why tell the story of people who don't get the miracle?
Why tell the story of people who don't get the miracle? Well, yeah, because I think there's just a lot of people that don't get the miracle, and whatever that, I mean, I'm putting miracle in quotes, right? You know, um, and initially I'd called that story Saltwater Tears because, and I don't exactly know where I read this or if it's entirely true, but like in the Passover meal, there's salt water. And maybe we also need to, other than celebrating the liberation from Egypt, we should lament the dying of the soldiers or the people that were chasing them in the Red Sea. So life, that's life. And I just remember, yeah, often thinking about that village that wanted to go and planned to go. And the reason it set them so entirely in a different direction was once Shumanovka had crossed, the Soviets completely cleared the areas near the river, tightened up the boundary. I mean, all hope of crossing out of Russia was lost. And we follow Nikolai then, and he ends up in a work camp and yeah, so on and so forth. So I don't know why, because it's there, I guess. Good question.
Are there any other questions from our audience?
Be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. Sure.
When you're writing something that's a piece of fiction that's so hold it close to your mouth. That's so rooted in historical events. At what point do you say, okay, I can't, I just have to stop with all the research. I have to it's fiction after all. I've got to get to the story. Or do you obsess about the historical fact?
Well, I love to research for one thing, so it's sometimes hard to quit and actually write the story. But I do obsess, and my biggest fear is that some, um, you know, arrogant Mennonite historian is going to come to me and say, "You got that little teeny detail wrong. You were off by 3 people or something." But I think the bigger challenge is how to actually keep the story central, which is a universal story. It has a fictional, I mean, a historical setting, but how to tell enough of it so that it makes sense to readers who don't know maybe that, but the universal piece of it is, yeah, like I explained, that we live on one side of an event or the other. And so especially in that last story, it became a bit of a challenge because how to give enough history, again, to make the context compelling without sacrificing the human story at the heart of it. So, I was glad for Freehand is a wonderful publisher and a very good editor, and she could kind of feed back to me whether it was enough history or too much or whatever. Thank you. Oh, good question.
Do you have any other audience questions? Another one? Oh, we've got another one over here.
I don't want to monopolize.
It's your birthday.
It's all right. For you personally, how has fiction been a helpful tool as you've faced your own rivers in your life?
My own what?
How has fiction or writing fiction been a helpful tool for you as you face your own rivers in your life?
Well, I think whether reading stories or writing stories, it's the same help, I guess I would say. I think I even wrote this quote down here somewhere that Ian McEwan said, imagining what it is like to be someone other than yourself is at the core of our humanity. And the philosopher Nussbaum also said, was talking about novels, but I think the same is for short stories or any fiction, that they teach us to love. So to me, it's whether you're writing it or reading, it's the same help. So it does help, yeah. And I mean, it's really kind of odd because once a story is written and like published, it doesn't actually feel like my story anymore. And it also begins to kind of teach me, if that makes sense. You know, I read stories from long ago and who wrote this? But anyways,
You guys really took it seriously. When
I think
said
other
hard-hitting.
writers in the room would agree with me, probably.
I was just gonna say, you guys really took it seriously when I said hard-hitting questions. My goodness. I have a question. Are there any other historical events that you are curious to explore in the future in your fiction?
No.
Fair enough.
No, but seriously, these two were just have been in my head for so long, and I'm just so happy because I when I went back and looked at my journal when I was working on it, like the two Mennonite, I was just like writing to myself, like I don't think this will never be published. I don't think they're any good, and but I have to get them out of my head. Like that, I really. This sounds kind of maybe mystical and weird, but I think that writers are given stories. And so you need to serve the story, and then because nobody else is going to, the other people have other stories. We all have things to do. And so so yeah, I kind of feel like been there, done that.
I might turn it over to Shawn again. But if you have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand. We can maybe pause at some point.
Yeah, thank you for your questions.
In Winnipeg, the video's online. I mined it for some good question ideas. You talked about your drafting and revision process, and that sometimes that involves cutting paragraphs and sentences up into pieces and rearranging them on the floor. And I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, that's what I do. Because once the process is weird, but once you've got the glimmer of the story and you open your mind to it, it's like a door, and then scenes will come in. And so you write those scenes. But at least for me, I don't know about other writers, it doesn't come in a nice flow, or maybe the structure hasn't been figured out yet. They're just scenes about this story. And then maybe the way you've put it together isn't working and you have to cut it up and rearrange it and see if that works. And then eventually, like for stories, I will print it out and put it on carefully one after another on the bed, all around the bed. And then I walk around reading it to see if it, like I can't get the sense of it just turning the pages. I have to sort of see it in a line. I don't know. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
But it doesn't work if you're writing a novel because you don't have a big enough bed. So there, it's more, okay, this chapter's about this, and then you still do the same process.
I have a couple other questions about the short story collection, but I just have to pause that, and maybe that's enough about the short story collection. I want you to give elevator pitch is a bit of a cliche, but you gotta sell. There's a bunch of copies of this book, which like I say, it's the best novel I've read in 2026. Tell them about it. All That Belongs from 2019.
Yeah, well, you kind of surprised me with that, so I didn't have a chance to reread it to remember what it's about. But no, it's about a woman who's an archivist, and she spent her whole life, preserving and collecting and managing the memories and archives of others. But when she retires, there's a little event. It's very small, but it kind of nudges and compels her to look into her own past, which includes a very unusual uncle, I'd say. Yes, and they call him Uncle Must. It's not his real name, Uncle Must, and then also includes a brother who is a bit of a tragic figure. So she hasn't wanted to go back, but she does, and that's what the book is about.
It is deeply ruminative and extremely powerful. How are we doing? Okay. I heard you tell an interesting little anecdote about the duplication of a main character's name. Lily is the main character in Blue. What do you want to say about the other plate? That name came from somewhere else.
Yeah, so sometimes my characters come to me with names, and I mean, the Mennonite stories, there's only so many names you can choose from, and you they sort of use the same names all the time over and over and over again. But anyways, Lily is the character in Blue. And as I was working on it, I more or less had the story done, and all of a sudden I thought, yeah, didn't I write another story with a lily one time? I better check this out. So I discovered, yes, it had been published in our Mennonite National Magazine. It's just a short story. And I realized it was the same Lily, like it was her backstory. It was an earlier grief that she had suffered, and it was in that earlier story. And it just was a kind of surprise from wherever these surprises come, the spirit, the muse, I don't know, but it didn't really alter the story. It just, to me, felt like a gift that I'd already known Lily and that other story.
So you said sometimes the characters come to you with a name.
Mhm.
So how about the other characters? How do you name them? Do you want to use my name in a short story?
That's the one I'm working on right now. Well, like I say, in the Mennonite stories, you after you've used up Heinrich and Johann and Jakob and Isaac, there's not too many names left, but yeah, what do names convey? I don't know. In the regatta, Constance just feels like the right name. I don't know. I think that's her name. I think
Yes, it is.
but yeah, and in her own self. Marta, I mean, I hope there's no Martas here. It sounds a little bit humble, and unnoticed, doesn't it? So it fits her.
Who are some of your favorite short story writers, or what are some of your favorite short stories?
Well, I remember so clearly, and I bet you some of you do too, short stories that we took in high school. Like, I think The Cache of Amontillado, did anybody?
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Oh,
And The Open Window by Saki. Like these stories, I've never forgotten them because we studied them. Some of my favorite short story writers, Lauren Groff has a new book out. I really like William Trevor. He's an Irish short story writer. And what I like about the thing about a short story, like you didn't ask this question about novels versus short stories, but to me, a novel maybe is more satisfying because you get really deep into it and you go along for a long time and then you come to the end and it's all kind of wraps up. A short story doesn't always do that. It's more compressed, but I think it can be just as maybe even more powerful because you have the feeling at the end, I'm not finished, so I need to go back and read it again. And there's often like with William Trevor, like a psychological little clues hidden in do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah, so I like him. I like Claire Keegan. Yeah. So that's about all I can think of right now.
that's great. I heard your answer to this question in Winnipeg online, and I want a chance to kind of rebuff what I think you said there. So what are you working on now, Dora?
Nothing.
Well, that part's fine, but I also heard you intimate that this might be your last book.
Well, I mean, why can't I retire? Yeah, no, I'm working on, you know, I'm going to give up and present a paper at a conference in fall and, little things like that. And I'll do maybe some essays. I like writing essays, dabble in poetry. So I'm not going to put all my pens away and my paper, but I don't know, I feel satisfied at the moment that this is good. But never say never,
I don't think it's probably private, but what's your paper about that you're?
Oh, well, every year the chair of Mennonite Studies at the University of Winnipeg does a conference of some sort. And their conference this year is on communication, like technology, And I did my master's thesis on the topic of communication discourse so I'm going to present a paper about the correspondence of my grandparents, about 140 letters, I think it is, that they exchanged during World War I, while my grandfather was working in the medical corps in the Caucasus, and my grandmother was, so just analyzing correspondence as a technology, as communication.
Sounds like a novel in waiting to me. Dora, it's been fun and it's been a real honor to talk to you about this collection. Thank you.
Well, I feel so grateful for you, Shawn, and thank you.
Shawn, just one question about the cover. With my history of interest in art, just mention about the cover
Of this one, yeah. Tell us about the cover for this one.
Oh,
Tell us
this,
about the cover for both of them, why not?
Sorry to interrupt.
this is the painting by my sister-in-law, Agatha Fast Dirksen. And she's an artist and she had it was already painted, and I remember when Turnstone, do you have any ideas? I mean, they ultimately choose the cover, but if you have any suggestions, they're open to them. And I remembered this painting, which is so appropriate because there's all these old people, I mean, like memories and people in her head. And this one, again, they're free hands. Just the name of forgot her name in the moment. Natalie Olson. And I think she did a great job of representing it. I think we knew you can't do a literal, like the river divides the earth, like just a river with grass and trees. No, it has to be a bit more symbolic, but I think she did a good job. Very happy with it.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say thank you once again, Dora and Shawn, both of you guys for being here and for, whoa, no, we're good. Okay, just a little echo. We're good. All right. So just want to reiterate, if you guys would like to purchase a book, we have them at the front table there. We have them over there. I'm going to get Dora to go over and sign for you guys. And other than that, just another round of applause for our presenters today.
Go home.